At lunchtime, two twin sisters are surrounded by cruel classmates and humiliated in front of everyone. While laughter echoes and food is thrown at them, no one notices an elegant man watching the scene from a distance. The millionaire storms in with fury, and what he does shocks everyone. If you're interested in this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know which city you're watching us from. We'll continue. The fluorescent lights of Lincoln Elementary School cafeteria buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the long tables where children gathered for lunch. In the farthest corner, away from the windows and the laughter, two small figures sat hunched together. Emma and Lily Carter, 9 years old, identical twins with soft brown hair pulled back in simple ponytails, shared a paper bag between them. Their fingers carefully divided slices of dry bread spread thinly with peanut butter, and they took turns biting into a bruised apple that had seen better days. Around them, the cafeteria pulsed with energy. Children from wealthy families displayed their lunches like trophies, organic snacks, imported juices, meals prepared by private chefs. The contrast was stark, deliberate, cruel. Emma glanced at her sister, and Lily returned the look with a small, brave smile. They had learned not to speak much during lunch. Speaking drew attention, and attention brought pain. At the center table, beneath the largest skylight, sat Brandon Mitchell. 12 years old, tall for his age, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. His father was Congressman Robert Mitchell, a man whose face appeared on billboards across Pittsburgh, promising prosperity and family values. Brandon wore designer clothes and an air of untouchable privilege. Around him sat his circle. Children who laughed at his jokes, echoed his words, and followed his lead without question. Brandon's gaze swept across the cafeteria and landed on the twins. He leaned toward his friends, whispered something, and the group erupted in laughter. Emma felt her stomach tighten. She recognized that look. It was the same look that preceded yesterday's humiliation, and the day before, and the week before that. Lily reached for her sister's hand under the table, squeezing gently. They had each other. That was enough. It had to be enough. Brandon stood, his chair scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. The cafeteria noise dimmed slightly as students sensed something about to happen. He picked up his tray, still half full of gourmet pasta and grilled chicken, and walked slowly toward the corner where the twins sat. His friends followed, phones already raised, recording. Emma and Lily froze, their small bodies tensed, preparing for what was coming, but powerless to stop it. Brandon stopped in front of their table, towering over them. He smiled down, that cold, practiced smile. "Hey, charity cases," he said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "I heard your dad was some kind of hero. Is that true?" The twins said nothing. Lily's grip on Emma's hand tightened. "Oh, wait," Brandon continued, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "He's not around anymore, is he? Guess he wasn't that much of a hero after all." Laughter rippled through the cafeteria. Phones captured every moment. Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give him that satisfaction. Brandon tilted his tray slightly. "You know what? I think you two need better food. Let me help you out." The first glob of pasta hit Emma's shoulder. The second splattered across Lily's hair. Marinara sauce dripped down their faces as Brandon's friends joined in, tossing scraps of food, laughing, recording, performing for their audience. The twins sat motionless, enduring, waiting for it to end. Across the cafeteria, Mrs. Henderson, the supervising teacher, watched from her position near the door. She saw everything. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned her head away, murmuring to another teacher, "Those girls bring it on themselves, coming here looking like that, expecting sympathy." The assault continued. Emma felt something cold slide down her back. Lily's small frame shook, not from crying, but from the effort of holding everything inside. They had learned that crying only made it worse. Brandon raised his hand for one final throw when the cafeteria doors burst open with such force that they slammed against the walls. The sound echoed like a gunshot, and every head turned. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than most families spent in a month. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, his posture commanding. His eyes, steel grey and sharp, swept across the cafeteria, taking in the scene with the precision of someone accustomed to assessing situations instantly. William Thornton, owner of Thornton Steel Industries, one of the largest steel manufacturing companies in the United States. His name appeared on buildings, scholarships, and political donation lists. He was a man who shaped cities, influenced elections, and commanded respect through wealth and power. He walked forward, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor. The crowd parted instinctively. Brandon, caught mid-throw, lowered his hand slowly, confusion replacing his cruel confidence. William's gaze locked onto the twins. He saw them covered in food, sauce dripping from their hair, their small bodies rigid with humiliation. Something in his expression shifted, a crack in the granite facade. His jaw clenched, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. He moved quickly, crossing the distance in long strides. He reached the twins just as Brandon prepared to say something, probably a defense, an excuse. William's hand shot out, not violently, but firmly, gripping Brandon's wrist and stopping him cold. "Enough," William said. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried across the silent cafeteria like thunder. Brandon tried to pull away, but the grip held firm. "Who are you? You can't just—" "I can," William interrupted, his eyes never leaving the twins. "And I will." He released Brandon's wrist and immediately removed his suit jacket, a garment worth thousands of dollars. Without hesitation, he draped it over Emma's shoulders, then gently wiped sauce from Lily's face with his handkerchief. The twins stared up at him, confused, frightened, uncertain. William knelt down, bringing himself to their eye level. His voice softened, though it still carried authority. "You're safe now. No one will hurt you again." The cafeteria remained frozen. Students whispered, phones still recording, but now capturing something entirely different. The principal, Mr. Davis, rushed in, alerted by the commotion. He was a thin man with nervous energy, someone who had built a career on pleasing the right people. He saw William Thornton and immediately understood the delicate situation. "Mr. Thornton, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," William said, standing but keeping himself between the twins and the crowd. "These children were assaulted. I witnessed it." "I assume you have protocols for such incidents?" Mr. Davis stammered, glancing at Brandon, then at Mrs. Henderson, who had suddenly found great interest in her clipboard. "Well, yes, but children sometimes, they play rough. It's not always—" "It wasn't play," William said flatly. "It was deliberate cruelty, and your staff watched." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her voice defensive. "Mr. Thornton, with all due respect, these girls have been difficult. They don't fit in. Sometimes children need to learn—" "Learn what?" William's voice cut like a blade. "Learn that cruelty is acceptable, that humiliation builds character?" Before anyone could respond, the cafeteria doors opened again. A woman entered, moving quickly, her face flushed with worry. She wore a nurse's uniform, the scrubs worn and faded from countless washes. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her eyes, the same shade as the twins, scanned the room frantically. "Emma Lilly!" Sarah Carter pushed through the crowd, her voice breaking. She had received a call from a parent, a rare kindness, telling her something was happening at the school. She had left work immediately, risking her job, driven by the terror that only a mother knows. She reached her daughters and dropped to her knees, pulling them into her arms, checking them for injuries, her hands shaking. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" The twins, who had remained silent through everything, finally broke. They buried their faces in their mother's shoulders and wept. Sarah looked up, ready to confront whoever had done this, and her eyes met William Thornton's. The color drained from her face. Recognition, shock, and something deeper, something painful flashed across her features. "Dad?" The word came out as a whisper, barely audible. William stared at the woman before him. He had not seen his daughter in 10 years. 10 years since she had walked out of his mansion, choosing love over luxury, choosing a soldier over security. 10 years since he had told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life, and that if she left, she would not be welcome back. The cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Sarah's shock transformed into fury. She stood slowly, her daughters clinging to her sides. "What are you doing here?" "I came to—" William began, but Sarah cut him off. "You have no right to be near them. You made your choice 10 years ago." "Sarah, please, don't." Her voice shook with rage and pain. "You called him worthless. You said he would never be good enough. You told me I was throwing my life away." William's composure cracked. "I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "You threw me out. You disowned me. And now you show up here playing hero?" She looked down at the expensive jacket draped over Emma's shoulders and ripped it off, throwing it to the floor. It landed in a puddle of spilled sauce and trampled food, the fine fabric soaking up the mess. "We don't need your charity. We don't need you." Sarah took her daughter's hands and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted again, silent witnesses to a family fracture laid bare. William stood motionless, watching them leave, the weight of 10 years pressing down on him. But he did not leave. Instead, he turned to Mr. Davis, his voice cold and businesslike once more. "I want a full investigation into this incident. I want those responsible held accountable, and I want it done today." Mr. Davis nodded frantically. "Of course, Mr. Thornton. We'll handle it immediately." "See that you do," William said. He picked up his ruined jacket from the floor, folded it carefully and walked out. Outside, Sarah was already halfway to the parking lot, her daughters running to keep up with her quick pace. William followed at a distance, not approaching, just watching. He saw them climb into an old sedan, the paint faded, one taillight held on with tape. He watched the car pull away, heading toward the east side of the city, toward neighborhoods he had not visited in decades. He returned to his own car, a sleek black Mercedes, and instructed his driver to follow. They drove through changing landscapes, from manicured lawns and boutique shops to cracked sidewalks and boarded windows. The contrast was stark, painful. The sedan stopped in front of a deteriorating apartment building. Graffiti covered the lower walls, and several windows were covered with cardboard. Sarah and the twins disappeared inside. William sat in his car staring at the building. His driver waited silently, accustomed to his employer's moods. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street. Finally, William stepped out of the car. He approached the building, climbed the stairs, and found the apartment number he had seen Sarah enter. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What right did he have? What could he possibly say? Before he could decide, the door opened. Sarah stood there, her eyes red from crying, her expression hard. "I knew you'd follow us. You always have to have control, don't you?" "I just want to help," William said quietly. "Help?" Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "Where were you when I needed help? When I was pregnant and scared? When David deployed and I was alone? Where were you then?" William had no answer. The silence stretched between them, filled with years of hurt and regret. Sarah's shoulders sagged. She looked exhausted, defeated. They destroyed his memory today. They mocked him, called him worthless, just like you did. "I was wrong," William said, the words costing him more than he expected. "I was wrong about him. I was wrong about everything." Sarah studied her father's face, searching for sincerity, for truth. She saw something there, something broken and real. With a heavy sigh, she stepped aside. 5 minutes. That's all you get." William entered the small apartment. It was clean but sparse, furniture worn, walls bare except for one corner. There, carefully arranged, was a memorial. A folded American flag in a display case, military medals pinned to velvet, and a photograph of a young man in uniform, smiling, proud, alive. David Carter, the man William had dismissed as beneath his daughter, the man who had loved Sarah completely, the man who had given his life for his country and left behind a widow and 2 daughters. William stood before the memorial, unable to look away from the photograph. The young man's eyes seemed to look right through him, challenging him, asking him what he had done to deserve such judgment. Emma and Lily appeared in the doorway of their small bedroom, cleaned up now, wearing pajamas that were slightly too small. They watched the stranger in their home, the man who had protected them, the man their mother called Dad. William turned to them, and for the first time in decades his carefully constructed walls crumbled. "I'm your grandfather," he said softly, "and I'm so very sorry." The silence that followed William's apology was heavy, thick with years of pain and missed opportunities. Emma and Lily stood in their doorway, their small hands clasped together, watching this stranger who claimed to be their grandfather. Sarah stood frozen, her arms crossed defensively, her eyes searching her father's face for any sign of manipulation or ulterior motive. William looked around the small apartment, truly seeing it for the first time. The furniture was old but meticulously maintained. The floors were clean despite the worn linoleum. Everything had its place, organized with the precision of someone who had very little and could not afford to lose anything. His eyes returned to the memorial, to David's photograph, to the medals that represented sacrifice he had never understood. "Tell me about him," William said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual authority. Sarah's expression hardened. "Why? So you can judge him again? Decide he still wasn't good enough?" "No," William said, and the word came out rough, honest. "So I can understand what I lost, what I threw away." Sarah studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she walked to the memorial and picked up the photograph. David Carter, born in a small town in Ohio, joined the army at 18 because he wanted to serve something bigger than himself. He was kind, patient, and he loved me when I had nothing to offer but myself. She set the photograph down carefully. "He called you, you know, the night before his final deployment. He wanted to ask for your blessing, wanted to tell you he'd take care of me and the girls. You didn't answer." William's face went pale. He remembered that night. An unknown number. He had ignored it, assuming it was another solicitation, another waste of his time. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Sarah said bitterly. "You never wanted to know." Emma, the braver of the twins, stepped forward. Her voice was small but clear. "Mama says Daddy was a hero, that he saved people." William looked down at his granddaughter, seeing her clearly for the first time. She had Sarah's eyes, but something else too, a quiet strength that must have come from her father. "Your mama is right. Your daddy was a hero, a better man than I ever was." Lily joined her sister, and, together they approached William cautiously, like small animals unsure whether to trust. "You stopped those boys from hurting us," Lily said softly. "That was brave." William knelt down again, bringing himself to their level. "What they did to you was wrong, and I'm going to make sure it never happens again." Sarah's voice cut through. "With money? That's your solution to everything, isn't it? Write a check and make the problem disappear." William stood, facing his daughter. "I know money can't fix what I broke, but I can use what I have to protect them, to give them what they deserve." "They deserve a family," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "They deserve a grandfather who cares about them, not one who shows up out of guilt." "Then let me try," William said. "Let me be that grandfather. I know I don't deserve the chance, but they do. They deserve to have someone fighting for them." Sarah looked at her daughters, at their hopeful faces, and felt her resolve weakening. She was so tired, tired of working double shifts, tired of stretching every dollar, tired of fighting alone. But she was also terrified, terrified of letting her father back in, only to have him leave again when things got difficult. "One chance," she finally said. "You get one chance. But the moment you try to control us, the moment you make us feel less than, we're done. Understood?" William nodded, relief flooding through him. Understood. That night, William Thornton, billionaire industrialist, slept on a threadbare couch in a rundown apartment in East Pittsburgh. The couch was too short, the springs poked through the cushions, and the sounds of the neighborhood, sirens, arguments, music, filtered through thin walls. He did not sleep well. but he did not leave. In the morning, he found the kitchen sink dripping, a steady leak that Sarah had been meaning to fix but could not afford a plumber. He found David's toolbox under the sink, the tools well used and carefully maintained. William, who had not done manual labor in 40 years, spent an hour figuring out how to replace the washer. His expensive shirt got soaked, his hands got dirty, and when he finally stopped the leak, he felt a satisfaction he had not experienced in decades. Emma and Lily watched from the doorway, giggling at his clumsy efforts. When he succeeded, they clapped, and the "ee" sound was sweeter than any boardroom applause he had ever received. For breakfast, he attempted to make macaroni and cheese from a box, following the instructions with the same focus he applied to corporate acquisitions. He overcooked the pasta and added too much milk, creating a soupy mess that made the girls laugh until they cried. But they ate it anyway, and they smiled at him, and something in William's chest, something that had been frozen for years, began to thaw. Sarah watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. She saw her father, this powerful man who commanded empires, struggling, with a box of pasta, and genuinely trying. It was not much, but it was something. It was a start. Later that day, William made phone calls. Within hours, a construction crew arrived at the apartment building. The landlord, initially hostile, became cooperative when he learned who was funding the renovations. The building received new windows, updated electrical systems, proper heating, and security measures. The other tenants, initially suspicious, began to understand that something was changing, but the improvements attracted attention. By the end of the week, a city inspector appeared, citing code violations and declaring the building unsafe. The hour's timing was suspicious, the violations questionable. Sarah recognized the political maneuvering immediately. "It's the Mitchells," she told her father. "They're trying to force us out." William's expression darkened. He made more calls, consulted with lawyers, and discovered that Congressman Robert Mitchell had significant influence over city inspections and zoning decisions. The message was clear: back off or face consequences. William had a choice. He could use his own political connections, call in favors, play the game the way he always had. Or he could do something different, something honest. He chose honesty. He contacted investigative journalists, provided them with documentation of the bullying incident, the videos that students had posted online, and evidence of the city's selective enforcement of building codes. He contacted military advocacy groups, told them about 2 young girls, daughters of a fallen soldier, being targeted and harassed while officials looked away. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Local news picked it up first, then regional outlets, then national media. The videos of Emma and Lily being pelted with food, of Brandon Mitchell's cruel laughter, of Mrs. Henderson turning away went viral. The public response was immediate and fierce. Congressman Mitchell held a press conference attempting damage control. He claimed his son was being unfairly targeted, that children make mistakes, that this was a private matter being exploited for political purposes. But the narrative had already shifted. People saw 2 small girls, daughters of a hero, being tormented while adults watched. They saw privilege protecting cruelty. They saw injustice. Principal Davis, facing mounting pressure, announced a full investigation. Mrs. Henderson was placed on administrative leave. Brandon Mitchell was expelled, and his parents, furious and humiliated, threatened legal action. But their threats rang hollow against the tide of public opinion. Through it all, William stood firm. He gave interviews, spoke about his granddaughters with pride, and publicly acknowledged his past mistakes. "I failed my daughter when she needed me most," he told a reporter. "I will not fail my granddaughters, not again." The political fallout was significant. Congressman Mitchell's poll numbers plummeted. Investigations into his campaign finances and city contracts began. The carefully constructed image of the family values politician crumbled under scrutiny. But for William, the real change was happening in a small apartment in East Pittsburgh. He spent evenings reading bedtime stories to Emma and Lily, his deep voice stumbling over children's rhymes. He learned their favorite foods, their fears, their dreams. He listened to Sarah talk about David, about their life together, about the struggles she had faced alone. One evening, Emma approached William with a small wooden box. "Mama doesn't know I have this," she whispered. "I found it under her bed." Inside was a letter yellowed with age, written in careful handwriting. William recognized the military stationery immediately. His hands shook as he unfolded it. The letter was addressed to him, written by David Carter, dated the night before his final deployment. "Mr. Thornton, I know you don't approve of me, and I understand why. I don't have wealth or connections, but I love your daughter more than anything in this world. I promise to take care of her and our children for as long as I'm able. If something happens to me, if I don't come home, I'm asking you, please, watch over them. They'll need family, they'll need you. I hope someday you can forgive me for taking Sarah away. I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to love her. Respectfully, David Carter." William read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. This young man whom he had dismissed and despised had thought of him in his final hours, had asked for his help, had shown him grace he did not deserve. Sarah found him sitting on the couch, the letter in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. She read the letter over his shoulder, her own tears falling. "I didn't know he wrote to you." "He was a better man than I ever gave him credit for," William said, his voice broken. "He was a better man than me." Sarah sat beside her father, and for the first time in 10 years she leaned against his shoulder. "He would have liked you, you know, if you'd given him the chance. He always believed people could change." "I want to honor him," William said. "I want to be worthy of this letter, of his trust." "Then be here," Sarah said simply. "Be present. Be their grandfather." The following Saturday, William took Sarah and the twins to the National Cemetery. They walked through rows of white headstones until they found David Carter's grave. The stone was simple, marked with his name, rank, and dates. Someone had left a small American flag and flowers that were beginning to wilt. William knelt before the grave, his expensive suit pants pressing into the grass. "I'm sorry I never knew you," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I judged you without giving you a chance. But I promise you, I will take care of them. I will be the grandfather your daughters deserve. I will honor your memory by loving the family you left behind." Emma and Lily placed fresh flowers on the grave, white roses that William had bought that morning. They stood quietly, their small hands folded, remembering a father they barely knew but loved completely. Sarah placed her hand on the headstone, her lips moving in silent conversation. Then she turned to her father. "David used to say he wanted to teach the girls to plant a garden. He said flowers were important, that they represented hope and beauty even in difficult times." "Then we'll plant flowers," William said. "We'll plant them together." In the weeks that followed, William Thornton made changes. He stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his company, appointing trusted managers to handle what he had once controlled obsessively. He sold his mansion and bought a modest house in a safe neighborhood, close enough to Sarah's apartment that the girls could walk over after school. The house had a large backyard, and together, William, Sarah, Emma, and Lily planted a garden. William, who had never gardened in his life, learned alongside his granddaughters. They planted roses, tulips, daisies, and sunflowers. They got dirt under their fingernails and laughed when the hose sprayed them accidentally. Emma and Lily returned to school, but to a different environment. The new principal, hired after Davis resigned under pressure, implemented strict anti-bullying policies. The twins were no longer invisible, no longer targets. Other children, inspired by their story, reached out, in friendship. One afternoon, the girls came home excited, talking over each other about a school project. They wanted to create a memorial garden at Lincoln Elementary, dedicated to military families. William helped them draft a proposal, and the school board approved it unanimously. The garden was planted in the spring with help from students, teachers, and community members. A small plaque was installed reading, "In honor of all who serve and sacrifice, planted with hope by Emma and Lily Carter, daughters of Sergeant David Carter, American hero." At the dedication ceremony, William stood with his arm around Sarah, watching. His granddaughters cut the ribbon. They wore matching dresses that he had bought them, and their smiles were bright and genuine. The crowd applauded, and for the first time in his life, William understood what true success looked like. It was not measured in dollars or power. It was measured in the laughter of children who felt safe, in the trust of a daughter who had forgiven him, in the promise of a garden that would bloom year after year, a living memorial to a man who had taught him, even in absence, what it meant to be truly wealthy. That evening, as the sun set over Pittsburgh, William sat in his backyard with Emma and Lily, teaching them how to properly water the seedlings they had planted. The girls asked endless questions, and he answered each one patiently, learning as much as he taught. Sarah watched from the porch, a cup of tea in her hands, and smiled. Her father had changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. He was trying, and that was enough. "Grandpa," Emma said, looking up at him with dirt-smudged cheeks, "do you think Daddy would be proud of us?" William set down the watering can and pulled both girls into a hug. "I think your daddy is very proud of you, and I think he's proud of your mama. And maybe if I keep trying, he might even be a little proud of me too." "We're proud of you," Lily said simply, and those 4 words meant more to William Thornton than any business achievement, any award, any accolade he had ever received. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, the small family went inside together. The house was not grand, but it was filled with warmth and laughter and love. William Thornton had spent his life building an empire, but only now, in this modest home with his daughter and granddaughters, did he finally understand what it meant to build a legacy. The garden would grow, the flowers would bloom, and every spring they would plant more, remembering the man who had started it all, the soldier who had loved deeply, served honorably, and left behind a family that would carry his memory forward with grace and strength.